Billionaire thought just his maid, until he saw her crying beside her mother. The Kincaid mansion sat on the corner of East 78th Street like a crown jewel. 5 stories of pale limestone, tall windows catching the morning light, wrought iron balconies draped in ivy. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that could make a cathedral jealous. Marble floors gleamed so clean you could see your own reflection walking back at you. And every morning at 4:47 a.m., before the sun had even decided to show its face, Serenity Lowe entered through the service door at the back. She was 27, slim, quiet in the way people become when they've learned that silence keeps them safe. Her curly black hair was always pulled into a tight bun, not a strand out of place. Her navy blue uniform was pressed crisp, white collar, white cuffs, white apron tied just so. She moved through that house like a whisper, dusting shelves no one would check, polishing silver no one would use. Serenity had worked at the Kincaid estate for 11 months. In that time, she had never once met the man who owned it. Dashiell Kincaid, tech billionaire, Forbes lists, magazine covers. The kind of man whose name came up at dinner parties even when no one had invited him. He was rarely home. Always in Singapore or London or wherever billionaires went when they got bored of being rich in one city. But his house was alive with people who acted like they owned it in his absence. And nobody acted more like that than Corvina Hatch. Corvina was the head housekeeper, a tall, sharp-boned woman in her mid-50s, with silver hair swept into a bun so tight it pulled her eyebrows into a permanent look of disapproval. She wore a charcoal blazer over her uniform, always carried a leather clipboard, and walked like the floors owed her something. She had worked for the Kincaid family for 19 years. That fact was tattooed into every word she spoke. Serenity. The voice came from behind her like a blade. Serenity was kneeling on the 3rd-floor landing, scrubbing the baseboards. She didn't flinch. She'd learned not to. "Yes, Mrs. Hatch?" Corvina stood above her, holding a porcelain teacup. It looked clean to anyone with functioning eyes. "There's a smudge. Where? Are you questioning me?" Serenity lowered her eyes. "No, ma'am." "Then wash it again. And redo the windows in the east parlor, all of them. I saw streaks." There were no streaks. Serenity had done those windows twice already, but she stood up, took the teacup, and said, "Yes, ma'am." Because that's what Serenity did. She endured. Not because she was weak. Not because she didn't feel the burn of it, the quiet humiliation of being spoken to like she was less than the furniture she dusted. She felt every word. They landed like small stones thrown at glass. But she had a reason to stay. And that reason was lying in a bed across town, connected to machines that beeped through the night. Her name was Opaline. Opaline Lowe, 70 years old, Serenity's mother. The only family she had left in this world. Opaline had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 14 months ago. She needed a valve replacement, a surgery that cost more money than Serenity would see in 5 lifetimes. Insurance covered a portion. The rest sat on Serenity's shoulders like a boulder she carried up a hill that never ended. Every paycheck went straight to the hospital, every dime. Serenity ate 1 meal a day, whatever was left in the staff kitchen after the others had their fill. She hadn't bought new shoes in over a year. The ones she wore had cardboard inside the left sole to cover the hole. She never complained, not once. Because when she visited Opaline on Tuesday evenings, the only night she had off, her mother would hold her hand, look at her with those tired, beautiful eyes and say, "Baby, you're my whole sunrise." And Serenity would smile so wide that the weight disappeared just for a moment. The other staff at the Kincaid estate ranged from indifferent to unkind. There was Priscilla, the cook, heavy-set, loud laugh, even louder opinions about everyone. She wasn't cruel exactly, but she had a habit of saying things that cut sideways. "Serenity, honey, you look like you haven't slept in a week. You okay?" "I'm fine, Priscilla." Well, Corvina's got a list for you this morning that'll make your eyes water. You know she saves the worst for you, right? Serenity said nothing. Girl, I don't know why you don't say something. Stand up for yourself. I need this job. Priscilla stirred her pot and shook her head. Need and deserve are two different things. Then there was Broderick, the chauffeur, mid-30s, slick hair, too much cologne. He drove a car he didn't own and somehow managed to act like it was his. He leaned against the kitchen counter as Serenity passed with an armful of linens. Morning, Cinderella. She didn't respond. You know, you'd be real pretty if you smiled more. I smile when there's something to smile about. But the one who made Serenity's days feel like walking on broken glass, the one who seemed to take personal pleasure in her suffering, was Corvina. It wasn't just the extra tasks. It wasn't just the inspections that always found invisible flaws. It was the way Corvina looked at her, like she was something to be scraped off a shoe. One afternoon, Serenity was arranging fresh white lilies in the main foyer, a task she actually enjoyed, one of the few moments of beauty in her day. She placed each stem carefully, turning the vase until the arrangement looked just right. Corvina appeared from nowhere. What are you doing? The flowers, ma'am, for the foyer. Corvina stared at the vase. Then, without a word, she reached over, pulled one lily out and dropped it on the floor. That one was wilting. Start over. It wasn't wilting. It was perfect. Serenity knelt down, picked up the flower, and started over. That evening, in the cramped studio apartment she rented above a laundromat in Washington Heights, Serenity sat on the edge of her bed and counted her money. $43 to last until Friday. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mount Sinai Medical Center. Ms. Levy, this is a reminder that payment for your mother's care is overdue by $4,200. Please contact our billing department at your earliest convenience. Serenity stared at the screen until the words blurred. Put the phone face down on the nightstand, pressed her palms together, and whispered a prayer so soft that even God would have had to lean in to hear it. Just give me the strength to get through tomorrow. That's all I'm asking. Just tomorrow. The next day brought a new kind of trouble. A woman arrived at the Kincaid mansion in a Blacktown car, long legs, designer heels, a white fur stole draped over one shoulder even though it was 65 degrees outside. She walked in like the walls should bow. Her name was Thelina Voss, Dashiell Kincaid's ex-fiancée. Their engagement had ended a year ago, reasons unknown to the staff, though Priscilla had theories she shared with anyone who'd listen. Thelina still had access to the house, still had a closet full of clothes in the East Wing, and still acted like the ring was on her finger. I need the guest suite prepared. I'll be staying for the weekend, she told Corvina, pulling off her sunglasses. Of course. I'll have Serenity handle it immediately. Thelina glanced at Serenity, who stood near the hallway holding a stack of towels. Her gaze moved over her like she was part of the wallpaper. Make sure the sheets are the Egyptian cotton, not that cheap blend from last time. They were Egyptian cotton, ma'am, Serenity said quietly. The room went still. Thelina's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I just meant I ordered those sheets myself. They were 600 thread count. I didn't ask for your resume on bedding. Thelina turned to Corvina. Does she always talk back? Corvina's jaw tightened. She won't again. You have my word. After Thelina disappeared upstairs, Corvina turned on Serenity with fury barely contained behind her teeth. If you ever speak to a guest of this house like that again, I will have you removed from this estate so fast your shadow won't keep up. Do you understand me? I was only... Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Corvina stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. You are a maid, Serenity. That is all you are. That is all you will ever be. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life becomes. She walked away, heels clicking on marble like a countdown. Serenity stood holding the towels, jaw tight, eyes burning. She did not cry. She hadn't allowed herself that luxury in months. Instead, she straightened her apron, lifted her chin, and went upstairs to make the bed with 600 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets. That night, her phone rang at 11:42 p.m. It was the hospital. "Miss Lowe? This is Dr. Adebayo. I'm calling about your mother." Serenity gripped the phone with both hands. "Is she okay?" A pause. The kind of pause that steals breath. "She had an episode tonight. Her heart rate dropped significantly. We stabilized her, but I need to be honest with you, Serenity. Without the surgery, we're looking at weeks, maybe less." The room tilted. "Weeks? I'm sorry. Her body is tired. She's fighting, but she needs more than fight. She needs that valve." Serenity sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the wall, phone pressed to her ear. How much is still left on the bill? Close to $47,000. $47,000. She made $14 an hour. When the call ended, Serenity pulled her knees to her chest and finally let herself cry. Not softly, not gracefully. She cried with her whole body, shoulders shaking, gasping for air between sobs, tears falling onto the worn carpet of a room that was barely big enough to hold her grief. And somewhere across the city, in a private jet descending toward Teterboro Airport, Dashiell Kincaid loosened his tie and looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline below. He was coming home. He had no idea what was waiting for him. A mother's last wish. Serenity didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed with a calculator, a notepad, and the kind of quiet desperation that turns ordinary people into mathematicians. She added, subtracted, divided her paycheck into pieces so small they barely existed. $47,000. Even if she gave every cent for the next year, no rent, no food, no subway, she still wouldn't reach it. The math didn't care about her prayers. At 3:15 a.m., she called her mother's hospital room. Opaline picked up on the second ring. Her voice was a thread, thin, fragile, but warm the way only a mother's voice can be. "Baby, why are you up so late?" "I just wanted to hear your voice, Mama." You've been crying." It wasn't a question. Opaline always knew. "The doctor called. He said you need the surgery soon." Silence. Then softly, "I know, baby. I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how yet, but I will." "Sweetheart, listen to me." Opaline's voice found a strength that didn't belong to a woman in a hospital bed with a failing heart. "If the Lord wants me home, then I go home. But if he wants me here, no bill on this earth is going to stop him. Mama, you've already given me everything. Don't carry guilt on top of everything else. I'm not giving up on you. I know. That's what scares me. Because you'll break yourself trying to save me, and I won't allow it." They stayed on the line for another 20 minutes, saying very little. Sometimes the sound of breathing is enough. Sometimes love doesn't need words. It just needs to know the other person is still there. The next morning, Serenity arrived at the mansion with a decision forming in her chest like a fist. She couldn't afford the hospital anymore. They were going to discharge Opaline within 5 days if the balance wasn't addressed. Discharge her. To where? Opaline's apartment had been given up months ago. There was no family, no cousins who answered the phone, no church fund large enough. There was only Serenity. And Serenity had one thing most people didn't: keys to a mansion with 26 rooms, 14 of which hadn't been entered in months. The guest cottage sat behind the main house, past the rose garden, tucked behind boxwood hedges. 1 bedroom, a sitting room, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, its own entrance from the back alley. The staff rarely went there. On Thursday night, after everyone had gone home, Serenity drove to Mount Sinai in a borrowed car, signed the discharge papers with trembling hands, and brought her mother to the cottage. She carried medications in a plastic bag. Her mother's favorite blanket, lavender crocheted, older than Serenity herself. A small framed photograph of them at Coney Island, taken 12 years ago, both laughing at something neither could remember. She set up the bed, arranged medications on the nightstand with a handwritten schedule taped to the wall, filled a glass of water and placed it within reach. Then she sat on the edge of the mattress and watched her mother's face, the way her eyes took in every detail of the room, the way her fingers traced the blanket's crocheted edges like she was reading something written there in thread. Opaline looked around with wide eyes. "Serenity, where are we?" "Somewhere safe, Mama." "This isn't a hospital." "No, but you'll be comfortable. I'll check on you every break I get." "Whose house is this?" Serenity smoothed the blanket. "The man I work for." "Does he know I'm here?" A beat. "He won't find out." Opaline reached for her hand. "Serenity." "Mama, please. They were going to put you on the street." Opaline held her daughter's hand, frail fingers, paper-thin skin, but a grip that said, "I'm still here." "You're a good girl." "Too good for this world. I'm just trying to keep you in it." For 3 days, it worked. Serenity arrived at 4:47 a.m. as always, cleaned, polished, endured. During her morning break, she slipped out the side door, crossed the garden, brought Opaline breakfast, toast, fruit tea with honey. At lunch, she changed sheets, gave medications, sat beside her mother for 12 minutes holding her hand. At night, she slept on the cottage floor beside her mother's bed. Woke at 4, showered, uniform, the cycle again. She was running on fumes, 2 hours of sleep, 1 meal a day, a fear that lived in her throat like a bone she couldn't swallow. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her hands were raw from scrubbing, but every time she thought about stopping, she looked at her mother's sleeping face and remembered why she started. Opaline was safe. Opaline was alive. For now, that was enough. On the 4th day, Corvina found out. It happened the way most secrets die, not with drama, but with a small, stupid mistake. Serenity had left a teacup in the cottage sink, a porcelain teacup from the Kincaid kitchen, hand-painted, imported from Paris, part of a set of 12. Corvina noticed it missing during her afternoon inventory. She noticed everything. She searched the main house first, every cabinet, every shelf. When she didn't find it, she followed the trail with the patience of a predator. She opened the cottage door without knocking. And there was Opaline, sitting up in bed, the teacup beside her, the lavender blanket across her lap, startled confusion on her face. Corvina stared. Opaline stared back. "Who?" Corvina said slowly, every syllable a blade. "Are you?" "My office. Now." 2 words. No explanation needed. Serenity set down her cloth, walked downstairs, and entered the small office behind the kitchen. Corvina was already seated, arms crossed, clipboard closed. "Shut the door. Sit." Serenity obeyed. 10 seconds of silence. Then, "There's an elderly woman in the guest cottage. Medications on the nightstand. A framed photo of you both." She tilted her head. "Explain, or I call the police." "Please don't." "Then talk." "She's my mother. Heart failure. The hospital discharged her because I couldn't pay, and I had nowhere." Her voice broke. "She can barely walk. She can barely breathe." Corvina watched her the way a cat watches a bird with a broken wing. "You brought an unauthorized person onto Mr. Kincaid's property. You used his cottage as a nursing home. You took food from his kitchen. You took a teacup." "I didn't steal." "You removed property without permission. That is theft." Serenity closed her mouth. There was no winning this. I should fire you right now. Please, I'll do anything, extra hours, weekends, every room twice. Just please, don't make me move her. She has nowhere to go. She'll end up in a shelter and she won't survive that. Please. Corvina tapped the clipboard. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of someone handed power who intended to use every ounce. Your mother stays, for now. But you take on my duties in addition to yours. East wing, west wing, 3rd floor, to you alone. No complaints, no mistakes. And if anyone finds out, I tell Mr. Kincaid's office you've been stealing, you will be prosecuted. Serenity stared. Your job and mine? The privilege of my silence. The words sat between them like poison. One more thing. You speak to no guest unless spoken to first. You are invisible. If I see your face where it shouldn't be, the arrangement ends. She opened the door. You may go. Serenity stood. Her legs felt borrowed. At the door she stopped. Mrs. Hatch, why do you hate me? Corvina looked at her, really looked, and for the briefest flash, something moved behind her eyes. Something old, gone before it could be named. I don't hate you. I just know what you are, and what you'll never be. She closed the door in Serenity's face. That night, Serenity sat on the cottage floor, back against her mother's bed. Opaline's fingers moved through her hair. She found out, Opaline said. Yes. What did she say? I can stay, twice the work. I don't want you suffering like this for me. You're right here. That's all that matters. At what cost? Your skin and bones. I'd let 100 Corvinas use me if it meant keeping you safe. Opaline squeezed her shoulder. A tear slid down her cheek. I had a dream last night. A man walked into this room, tall, kind eyes. He didn't say a word, just stood there looking at you, and he saw you, Serenity, not as a maid, not as someone to push around. He saw you. Serenity smiled, small, tired, disbelieving. That's a nice dream, Mama. It wasn't a dream, it was a promise. She kissed her mother's hand. Get some rest. She wouldn't rest herself. 6 hours of Corvina's tasks waited before dawn. But she kissed Opaline's forehead, turned off the lamp and stepped into the garden. The main house loomed above, every window dark except one, 4th floor, the owner's suite. Someone was home. She stared at that window, then hurried inside through the service door. She didn't know that behind the glass, Dashiell Kincaid stood looking down at the garden below. He had seen someone cross the lawn, a woman in a navy uniform, moving quickly, carrying something heavy that wasn't in her hands. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He didn't know that she'd just spent 14 hours cleaning a house that wasn't hers, so she could keep her dying mother in a cottage she had no right to use. But something about the way she moved, hurried, careful, alone in the dark, made him pause. He watched until she disappeared. Then he stood there a long time, staring at the garden, thinking about something he couldn't quite name. The man in the doorway. Dashiell Kincaid had been awake since 4 a.m., not because he wanted to be, because the silence of his own house unsettled him in a way he hadn't expected. He'd been gone for 3 months. Hong Kong, then Berlin, then Sao Paulo, closing deals, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, in rooms that smelled like leather and ambition. He'd come home expecting rest. Instead, he found a house that felt like a museum, beautiful, cold, full of things no one touched. He stood in the kitchen at dawn, making his own coffee because he didn't know where the staff kept the pods. The machine hissed and sputtered. He burned his thumb on the steam wand. He swore under his breath and laughed at himself. A man who could buy the coffee company couldn't figure out the coffee machine. That's when he heard footsteps, quick, light, coming from the service corridor. A woman appeared in the doorway, navy uniform, white apron, hair pulled into a bun. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes went wide, like she'd walked into the wrong room at the wrong time in the wrong universe. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was—" She stepped back. "It's fine." He held up his cup. "I was just losing a fight with this machine." She stared at him, then at the machine, then at the puddle of milk foam on the counter. "You have to prime the steam wand first," she said carefully, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to speak. "Prime it? Run it empty for 3 seconds before you put the pitcher under, otherwise it spits." He looked at the machine, then back at her. "You just saved this countertop's life." The smallest flicker of something, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one, crossed her face. It disappeared before it fully arrived. "Can I clean that up for you, sir?" "Dashiell, just Dashiell. And no, I made the mess. I'll get it." She looked at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't recognize, a billionaire cleaning his own spilled milk. She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded once and disappeared down the hall. He stood there for a moment, cloth in hand, wondering why that brief exchange felt more real than any conversation he'd had in 3 months. Corvina appeared at 7 a.m. sharp, clipboard in hand, blazer buttoned to the throat. "Mr. Kincaid, welcome home. I wasn't informed of your arrival time. I would have had everything prepared." "It was a last-minute flight. Don't worry about it. Breakfast will be served in the dining room at 8. I've arranged— I already ate. Toast. Found it myself." He smiled. "The kitchen's not as complicated as I remembered." Corvina's smile didn't reach her eyes. She was a woman who needed to be needed, and Dashiell making his own toast was a personal offense. "Will you be staying long, sir?" "A while. I'm not sure yet. I'll have the 4th-floor suite refreshed. Fresh linens, flowers. Already done. Someone left lilies on the hallway table, white ones. They're nice." Corvina's eye twitched. She knew exactly who had placed those lilies. She also knew that the person who placed them was supposed to be invisible. "I'll make sure the rest of the house meets your standards, sir." "It always does, Corvina. You run a tight ship." She nodded, satisfied, and walked away with her clipboard held like a shield. For 2 days, Dashiell moved through his house like a man relearning his own home. He wandered rooms he hadn't entered in years. The library with his late mother's first editions behind glass. The conservatory with its baby grand that no one played. And in every room, at every turn, he noticed the same thing. Someone had been here before him. The shelves were spotless. The silver gleamed. The windows were so clean they seemed to disappear. Even the baseboards, who cleaned baseboards, were scrubbed white. He asked Corvina about it. "Who handles the East Wing?" "I oversee all areas personally, sir." "But who does the actual cleaning, the detail work?" A pause, just a breath too long. "We have a small team. Everyone contributes." She didn't say Serenity's name. She never did. On the 3rd morning, Dashiell woke early again. This time it wasn't the silence that pulled him out of sleep. It was a sound, faint, coming from somewhere below, somewhere outside. He went to the window. The garden was silver with early light, dew sitting on the hedges like tiny glass beads. Everything was still, but there it was again, a sound carried on the cool air. Not a word, not a song. Crying. Someone was crying. He pulled on a robe and went downstairs, following the sound through the service corridor, past the kitchen, out the side door. The stone path led through the rose garden, past the boxwood hedges, to the guest cottage. The door was slightly open. He should have knocked, he should have called out. But something about the sound, the rawness of it, the depth, stopped him in the doorway. And what he saw broke something open inside his chest that he didn't know was sealed shut. Serenity was on her knees. She was kneeling beside an ornate cream and gold armchair where an elderly woman sat, frail, small, wrapped in a pale blue satin robe. The woman's short white hair caught the light from the window. Her eyes were closed, and tears ran down her weathered cheeks in slow, steady streams. Serenity held both of her mother's hands pressed against her own lips, sobbing. Not the quiet, controlled kind of crying that people do when they know someone's watching. This was the kind that comes from the bottom of everything, the kind that shakes the whole body, that sounds like something tearing. "Mama, please, please don't leave me. I can't do this without you. I can't." Opaline's voice came in fragments, broken by her own tears. "Baby, you've always been stronger than you know." "I'm not strong, Mama. I'm just scared. I'm so scared." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Serenity pressed her mother's hands harder against her face, like she was trying to memorize the feel of them, like she was holding on to something the world was trying to take. "I'll find the money. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. Shh. Just sit with me. That's all I need, just you, right here." Dashiell stood in the doorway, briefcase still in one hand from the office run he'd been about to make, and felt the air leave his lungs. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He watched the woman he'd seen in the kitchen, the one who'd told him to prime the steam wand, the one who smiled like she'd forgotten how, hold her dying mother's hands and weep like the world was ending. Because for her, it was. Something shifted behind his ribs, something heavy and warm and unfamiliar. He didn't have a name for it yet, but it felt like waking up. He stepped back silently, closed the door without a sound, and stood in the garden for a long time. Dashiell Kincaid, a man who had built an empire out of numbers and logic and the careful avoidance of feeling, stood on a stone path in his own backyard and felt his eyes burn. He wiped them with the back of his hand, took a breath, then another. Then he walked back inside and found Corvina in her office. "The guest cottage," he said. Corvina's face went pale. "Sir, there's someone living in the guest cottage, an elderly woman." Corvina set her clipboard down. Her jaw was tight. "Mr. Kincaid, I can explain. She's the mother of one of our housekeepers, Serenity Lowe. I discovered it several days ago and was handling it. The woman will be removed immediately and Serenity will be—" "Removed where?" Corvina blinked. "Excuse me?" "The woman. Where would she go?" "That's not really our concern, sir. An unauthorized—" "Is she sick?" "Heart failure, from what I understand. But this is a serious breach of—" "Does Serenity know I've seen them?" "No, sir." "Good. Don't tell her." Corvina's mouth opened, closed. "Sir, you want the woman to stay?" Dashiell looked at her for a long moment. His expression was calm, but something behind his eyes had changed. A door had opened that wasn't going to close. "I'm saying don't touch that cottage, don't move that woman, and don't say a word to Serenity." "But, sir—" "That's all, Corvina." He turned and walked out. Corvina stood alone in her office, clipboard in hand, and felt something she hadn't felt in 19 years of running the Kincaid estate. She felt the ground shift under her feet. That afternoon, Serenity was polishing the banister on the main staircase when she looked up and saw him. Dashiell was standing at the top of the stairs, reading something on his phone. He glanced down, saw her, and paused. "The steam wand woman," he said. She blinked. "Sir?" "From the kitchen, the other morning. You saved me from the coffee machine." "Oh, yes, I hope I wasn't overstepping." "You were saving a countertop. That's the opposite of overstepping." He came down a few steps. "What's your name?" She straightened. "Serenity, sir. Serenity Lowe." "Serenity." He said it like he was tasting the word. "How long have you worked here?" 11 months, sir." 11 months. And we've never met. You travel a lot. I do. He looked at her, not through her, not past her, not the way Corvina looked or Thalina looked or Broderick looked. He looked at her, like she was a person standing in front of him, not a uniform. The house looks incredible, by the way, better than I've ever seen it. Thank you, sir. Dashiell. Thank you. Dashiell. He nodded. Then he did something no one in that house had ever done. He said, "Thank you, Serenity, for taking care of things while I was gone." She stood on the stairs, holding her polishing cloth, and for the first time in months, she didn't have to force the smile. It came on its own, small, surprised, real. He continued up the stairs. She watched him go, and somewhere deep in her chest, in a place she'd boarded up and locked and told herself to forget about, a tiny light flickered on. Nobody sees her, but I do. It started with small things so quiet that Serenity almost missed them. On Monday, she found a brand new pair of work shoes outside the service entrance. Black, her exact size, still in the box, no note. She looked around. Nobody was there. She held them in her hands and turned them over, confused, then slipped them on because the cardboard in her left sole had started to disintegrate. They fit perfectly. On Wednesday, a bag of groceries appeared on the counter of the guest cottage while she was working inside the main house. Fresh fruit, whole grain bread, a container of homemade soup that was still warm, a bag of chamomile tea, Opaline's favorite. Serenity stared at the bag for a long time. Opaline, propped up in her armchair, pointed at it with a trembling finger. "Who left that?" "I don't know, Mama." "Somebody knows I'm here." "I know. And they're not calling the police." Serenity sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't have an answer. She didn't have an explanation. All she had was a pair of new shoes, warm soup, and a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. Someone was watching out for her. Dashiell didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He contacted Mount Sinai himself, got transferred 4 times, and reached someone in billing who could pull up Opaline Lowe's account. He didn't pay the balance, not yet. He just asked questions: how much was owed, what the surgery would cost. The numbers were staggering. Not for him. It was the cost of a weekend in Aspen. But for a woman making $14 an hour, it was a mountain with no summit. He sat in his office, staring at his screen, thinking about what he'd seen. The way Serenity held her mother's hands. The sound she made when she cried. His own mother, Lenora Kincaid, brilliant and fierce and gone too soon, had told him something when he was 16. Pay attention to the people who give everything and ask for nothing. They're the ones holding the world together. He hadn't understood it then. He understood it now. On Thursday, Serenity was cleaning the conservatory when she heard the piano. Someone was playing. Not well, hesitant, searching for notes, but with a kind of raw feeling that made her stop and listen. She set down her cloth and followed the sound. Dashiell was sitting at the baby grand, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was picking out a melody with 2 fingers, frowning at the keys like they owed him something. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. "My mother used to play this," he said. "I never learned. She always said I had the ears for it, but not the patience." Serenity stood very still. "What song is it?" "I have no idea. She used to play it on Sunday mornings. I just remember the shape of it." He pressed a key. Wrong note. He smiled at himself, not the polished smile from magazine covers, but a real one, lopsided and a little embarrassed. "Your mother," Serenity said carefully. "She passed. 3 years ago, cancer. She went fast. 6 weeks from diagnosis to—" He trailed off. Let the silence finish the sentence. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He looked at the piano. She loved this house. Really loved it. Not the way I love it. I love it because it's mine. She loved it because it was alive. She put flowers in every room. She knew everyone's name, every gardener, every delivery driver. She made this place feel like a home, not a monument. He paused. looked at Serenity. "You remind me of her." The words landed softly, but they hit hard. Serenity felt heat rise behind her eyes and blinked it away. "I should get back to work," she said. "Serenity." She stopped. "You don't have to disappear every time I walk into a room." She looked at him. He looked at her. And for a moment, the distance between a billionaire and a maid shrank to nothing. Just two people standing in a room full of light, both carrying grief they hadn't asked for. "Yes, sir," she said, and left. He watched her go, and the melody on the piano stayed unfinished. Corvina noticed everything. She noticed that Dashiell had started walking through the house at odd hours. She noticed that he lingered in rooms Serenity was cleaning. She noticed that the groceries in the cottage hadn't come from any delivery she'd authorized. She noticed the shoes, and it terrified her. Not because she cared about Serenity. She cared about control. For 19 years, she had run this house. She decided who stayed and who went. She decided who mattered and who didn't. And now the owner himself was paying attention to the one person Corvina had spent months making invisible. She went to the one person she knew would share her concern. "He's home," Corvina said into her phone. "And he's acting strange." Thalina Voss's voice came sharp. "Strange how?" "He's noticing people. Staff." "Which staff?" "The new girl. Serenity." Silence. Then, "The maid?" "He asked for her name. He talked to her in the kitchen like she was a person." "She is a person, Corvina. The question is whether she's a threat. She's a girl from Washington Heights who scrubs floors, but he looks at her like what? Like he sees her." Silence. Longer this time. "I'll be there tomorrow," Thalina said. "Don't do anything until I arrive." Thalina arrived the next morning in a white Mercedes, wearing a cream silk dress and gold jewelry. She walked into the foyer like she'd never left. "Dashiell!" He was coming down the staircase, phone in hand. He looked up, and his face did something interesting. It didn't light up. It rearranged into politeness. "Thalina, I didn't know you were coming. I heard you were home. I thought we could have dinner, catch up. I'm not sure that's just dinner, Dash, old friends." She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, practiced, perfect. He studied her for a moment, then he nodded. "Fine. Dinner. Wonderful, I'll have—" She looked around. "Where's the girl?" "The one who does the rooms." "Serenity?" Thalina's eyes sharpened at the name, at the speed with which he said it, at the familiarity. "Yes, I need the guest suite prepared. I'll let Corvina know. I'd rather tell her myself." She swept past him and went to find Serenity, heels clicking on the marble like a clock counting down. Serenity was in the east parlour, kneeling beside the fireplace, scrubbing the hearth with a wire brush. Her hands were raw, her back ached. She'd been up since 4, running through Corvina's list and her own, trying to stay ahead of the clock. Thalina appeared behind her. "You." Serenity looked up, stood, smoothed her apron. "Yes, Miss Voss?" "Guest suite, now. I want the diptyque candles, not those drugstore ones Corvina orders, and fresh peonies, not lilies. Lilies are depressing." "Yes, ma'am." Thalina didn't leave. She stood there, studying Serenity with a gaze that peeled back layers. "Dashiell mentioned you by name today." Serenity's stomach tightened. "I'm sure he was just—" "He never mentioned staff by name, not in the 5 years I've known him. I helped him with the coffee machine, that's all." Thalina tilted her head. "A coffee machine?" "Yes, ma'am." She stepped closer. Close enough that Serenity could smell her perfume, something that cost more than a month's rent. "Let me give you some advice, woman to woman." Serenity said nothing. "Men like Dashiell live in a different world. They collect things, art, companies, houses. Sometimes they collect people, but they don't keep them. They admire them for a moment, and then they move on. That's not cruelty. It's just how their world works. She reached out and adjusted Serenity's collar, a gesture that looked caring but felt like a warning. Don't confuse attention with intention. It'll save you a lot of pain. She turned and walked away. Serenity stood by the fireplace with soot on her knees and Talina's perfume lingering in the air like smoke. That evening, while Talina and Dashiell had dinner in the formal dining room, candles, wine, the good china, Serenity slipped away to the cottage. Opaline was awake, sitting in her chair, the lavender blanket across her lap. "How are you feeling, Mama?" "Better today. That soup helped." She paused. Was it him? Serenity sank into the chair beside her. Was what him? The soup, the shoes. Was it the man of the house? "I don't know, Mama." "Yes, you do. You just don't want to believe it." Serenity leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "His ex-fiancée is here. She's beautiful, she's rich. She walks through this house like she owns every brick. And she told me not to get confused. That men like him don't keep people like me." Opaline was quiet for a long moment. "Let me tell you something about men, baby. The ones worth having don't care about bricks. They care about who lays the foundation." Serenity opened her eyes. "Mama, he's a billionaire. I clean his floors." "And your father was a bus driver." "I was a seamstress. We had 41 beautiful years before the Lord took him home." She squeezed Serenity's hand. "Flaws don't define you. The way you walk on them does." Serenity kissed her mother's cheek. "I love you. I love you more. Now go get some sleep." Serenity smiled, a real smile, the second one that week, and stepped out into the garden. The dining room glowed amber through the tall windows. She could see the silhouettes inside, Talina leaning forward, laughing, touching Dashiell's arm. Dashiell sitting back, nodding, but his body turned slightly away, like he was present but not there. Then, for just a moment, he turned his head and looked out the window. Serenity froze. She was standing in the shadow of the hedges, barely visible, but he saw her. Their eyes met through the glass, 2 seconds, maybe 3, enough for the world to go quiet. Then Talina said something and he turned back. Serenity let out the breath she'd been holding and walked back to the cottage on legs that felt like they were made of something new. The secret he kept. The call came on a Tuesday. Serenity was on her hands and knees in the third-floor bathroom, scrubbing the grout between Italian marble tiles with a toothbrush, one of Corvina's favorite punishments disguised as tasks, when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She almost didn't answer. Corvina had a rule about phones during work hours. If she heard a ringtone, it was a written warning. 2 warnings and you were gone. But the caller ID said Mount Sinai. She ducked into the linen closet and whispered into the phone. "Hello? Ms. Lowe, this is Janet from billing at Mount Sinai. I'm calling about your mother's account." Serenity braced herself for the number, for the threat. "Your mother's outstanding balance has been paid in full, $47,214, and a prepayment has been made to cover the valve replacement surgery, including post-operative care." Serenity pressed her back against the wall. "That's not possible. I didn't make any payment." "The payment was made by a third party. They've requested to remain anonymous." "Anonymous?" "Yes, Ma'am. The funds have cleared. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for next Thursday." Serenity slid down the wall until she was sitting on the closet floor, surrounded by stacks of white towels. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." She hung up, pressed the phone against her forehead, and sat there crying without sound, shaking with something between gratitude and the fear that hope was just another trap. She told Opaline that night. "Paid in full?" Opaline whispered. "Every penny, and the surgery." "Who?" They wouldn't say. Opaline pressed her hand against her chest. Who in this world would do that for us? Serenity shook her head, but she did know. The shoes, the groceries, the chamomile tea, and now this. There was only one person with the means and the quiet. She thought about Dashiell at the piano, the way he'd said her name on the staircase, the window. "Mama, I think I know who it is." Opaline took her hands. "Then you know what your father would say. Grace doesn't need explaining, it just needs accepting." Over the next few days, something shifted in the house. Dashiell started finding reasons to be in rooms where Serenity was working. Not in an obvious way, nothing anyone could point to and call inappropriate. He'd walk through the library while she was dusting, pause to pull a book from the shelf, and ask if she'd ever read it. He'd pass through the kitchen while she was organizing the pantry and mention something about the weather. Small moments, ordinary words, but the space between them got smaller each time. One afternoon, he found her in the garden cutting roses for the foyer vases. "You know how to do that," he said from the path. "Priscilla showed me. You cut at an angle so the stem can drink." "My mother used to say the same thing." He walked closer. "Can I ask you something? Why do you stay? This job is hard. Corvina isn't exactly warm." Serenity snipped another rose. Took her time, because some things are worth being uncomfortable for. Like what? The people you love. He held her gaze and noticed, maybe for the first time, the exhaustion she carried, the shadows under her eyes, the raw knuckles. "You shouldn't have to suffer for love, Serenity." "Maybe not, but love doesn't ask permission, it just asks you to show up." He was quiet. Then he said something that stopped her hands mid-cut. "Your mother, how is she?" The shears went still. She looked at him, really looked, and in his eyes she saw it. He knew, he'd known for a while, the cottage, the blanket, the medications, all of it. "You know," she said, not a question. "I know." "How long?" "Since the morning I heard you crying." She set the shears down. Her hands were trembling. "Are you going to fire me?" "No." "Are you going to make me move her?" "No." "Then why didn't you say anything?" He looked at the roses in her basket. "Because you didn't need someone to say something. You needed someone to do something." The words landed like a key turning in a lock. And Serenity understood. The shoes, the food, the hospital bill, all of it. It was him. It had always been him. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "What do you say to a man who saved your mother's life and didn't want you to know?" "Thank you." Felt too small. Silence felt too empty. So she did the only thing that felt true. She pressed her hand against her heart and held it there, and he nodded once, like that was enough. But kindness in a house full of sharp edges is a dangerous thing. Thalina had been watching. She'd watched from the upstairs window as Dashiell stood in the garden with the maid. She'd watched the way his body leaned toward her, not with desire, but with something worse. Attention. Real attention. The kind he hadn't given Thalina even when they were engaged. She'd seen enough. That night, after Dashiell retired to his suite and the staff had gone, Thalina walked into Corvina's office and closed the door. "We have a problem," Thalina said. Corvina looked up from her ledger. "I'm aware." He paid her mother's hospital bill. The payment came from a Kincaid Holdings account. Corvina set her pen down. "This is worse than I thought. If he falls for a maid, a nobody from Washington Heights, do you know what that means? For his image? For us? If that girl becomes someone in his life, your 19 years running this house mean nothing." The words were cruel. They were calculated. Thalina knew exactly which buttons to press. Corvina sat very still. "What do you want me to do?" Thalina opened her bag and set something on the desk. A necklace, gold chain, a pendant shaped like a teardrop with a single diamond. Corvina recognized it. It had belonged to Lenora Kincaid. It lived in the jewelry case on the 4th floor, behind a glass door only Corvina had the key to. Where did you get that? I still know the combination. Thalina leaned forward. Tomorrow morning you find this in Serenity's locker. You call a staff meeting. You present the evidence. Immediate termination and a police report for theft of a family heirloom. Corvina stared at the necklace. The diamond caught the desk lamp and threw a tiny rainbow across the ceiling. If I do this, and Dashiell finds out, he won't find out. He'll see the evidence. He'll see a woman he trusted, a woman he was starting to care about, stealing from his dead mother's collection, and that will be the end of it. Corvina picked up the necklace. It weighed almost nothing, but it was heavy enough to destroy a life. Do it tonight, Thalina said, before she shows up in the morning. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out. Corvina sat alone in her office, holding a dead woman's necklace, and felt the thing she'd spent 19 years building begin to crack. But she opened Serenity's locker anyway, and she placed the necklace inside, tucked beneath a folded apron, exactly where it would be found. Serenity arrived at 4:47 a.m., the next morning with something she hadn't carried in months. Hope. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for Thursday. The bills were paid. Dashiell knew the truth and hadn't punished her. He'd helped her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. She changed into her uniform, tied her apron, pulled her hair into its bun. She was reaching for her cleaning supplies when Corvina's voice cut through the service hallway like a siren. All staff, conference room, now. Serenity looked at Priscilla, who shrugged and wiped her hands on her apron. What's this about? Broderick muttered, coffee in hand. Nobody knew. They filed into the small conference room. Serenity, Priscilla, Broderick, 2 part-time cleaners, the gardener. Corvina stood at the head of the table, and beside her stood Thalina, arms crossed, practiced sorrow on her face. I have a very serious matter to address, Corvina said. She placed a small velvet box on the table and opened it. The diamond teardrop caught the light. This necklace belonged to the late Mrs. Lenora Kincaid, a family heirloom of significant value. It was stored in a locked case on the 4th floor. This morning, during a routine inspection, it was found in a staff locker. Every head turned. Corvina's eyes landed on Serenity. Your locker, Serenity. The room went silent. Serenity felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the necklace. She looked at Corvina. She looked at Thalina, whose expression was a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't take that, Serenity said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I have never seen that necklace in my life. It was in your locker, Corvina repeated. Someone put it there. Thalina stepped forward, voice dripping with sympathy. Serenity, no one is accusing you of anything yet, but the evidence is... Evidence? Serenity's voice cracked. Someone planted that. I would never steal from this house. I would never... We'll need to contact the authorities, Corvina said, already writing on her clipboard. And Mr. Kincaid will need to be informed. Serenity stood up, her chair scraped the floor. Then inform him. Call him right now, because I didn't do this, and whoever did knows exactly what they're doing. She looked at Thalina, straight at her, and in that look was something Thalina hadn't expected. Not fear, not defeat, but a knowing so sharp it could cut glass. Thalina held her gaze for 1 second, then she looked away. Do you know who she is to me? The conference room was still. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Serenity stood with the eyes of every person in the room on her, and the silence pressed against her chest like a hand. I didn't take that necklace, she said again. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that lives on the other side of panic. I have never been to the 4th floor. I have never opened that case. Someone put it in my locker. Corvina's expression didn't change. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence can be arranged. Thalina stepped forward, arms still crossed. Serenity, I understand this is upsetting, but we all have to be held accountable. Perhaps if you just what? Confess to something I didn't do? Nobody's asking you to confess. We're asking for honesty. I am being honest. The room hummed with tension. Priscilla sat in the corner, arms folded, eyes narrowed, watching, calculating. Broderick looked at the floor. The part-time cleaners stared at the necklace like it might bite. Corvina picked up her phone. I'll contact Mr. Kincaid now. Good, Serenity said. Call him. Dashiell arrived in the conference room 7 minutes later. He walked in wearing a dark sweater and slacks, no jacket, no tie. His face was composed, but his eyes were doing something no one in that room had ever seen before. They were scanning, measuring, taking inventory of every face and every expression with the precision of a man who'd built a billion-dollar company by reading rooms. What's going on? He said. Corvina straightened. She held out the velvet box. Sir, I'm sorry to bring this to you. This necklace, your mother's necklace, was found in Serenity Lowe's locker this morning. Dashiell looked at the necklace, then at Corvina, then at Thalina, then at Serenity. She stood against the far wall, hands clasped in front of her, chin up, eyes wet but unbroken. She didn't look away. Who found it? Dashiell asked. I did, sir, Corvina said, during a routine inspection. What kind of inspection involves opening staff lockers? Corvina blinked. It's standard procedure to... In 19 years, Corvina, you have never once mentioned routine locker inspections. So, I'll ask again, what made you open her locker this morning? The room shifted. Priscilla leaned forward. Broderick looked up. Corvina's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture, but Dashiell saw it. I had reason to believe that certain items had gone missing from the... Which items? When were they reported missing? To whom? The necklace was the only... So you opened a locker because one necklace was missing. A necklace that has been in a locked case on the 4th floor. A case with a combination that only 2 people in this house know. He paused. You and Thalina. The fracture became a fissure. Thalina uncrossed her arms. Dashiell, I don't think this is the time to... It's exactly the time. He turned to her. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of stone. When did you arrive at the house yesterday? Around noon. And you went to the 4th floor. I went to my room in the East Wing. Your former room. And from there, you had access to the hallway that leads to my mother's suite, where the jewelry case is. Thalina's jaw tightened. You can't seriously be suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking questions. He looked at Corvina. Did Thalina come to your office last night? Corvina's face drained of color. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. Corvina! She... Yes, briefly. What did she bring with her? Silence, the kind that confesses. Dashiell turned to the room. He was calm. His voice didn't rise, but every word landed like a verdict. Let me tell you what happened. The necklace was removed from the case by someone who knew the combination. It was brought to Corvina. It was placed in Serenity's locker sometime last night, and this morning it was conveniently discovered, just in time for a staff meeting designed to humiliate and terminate a woman who has done nothing wrong. He looked at Thalina. Am I close? Thalina's mask cracked. This is ridiculous. I was trying to protect you. That girl is manipulating you. She brought her sick mother into your house. She's been eating your food, sleeping in your cottage. I know. The 2 words hit the room like a thunderclap. You know, Corvina whispered. I've known for weeks. I saw Serenity in the cottage with her mother. I saw a woman on her knees crying, holding her dying mother's hands, begging God for more time. He paused. Do you know what I didn't see? I didn't see a thief. I didn't see a manipulator. I saw a daughter. He walked to the table, picked up the necklace and held it up. This belonged to my mother, Lenora Kincaid. She wore it the day I was born. She wore it the day she walked me to my first day of school. She wore it the last time I saw her alive. He looked at Talina. And you used it as a weapon against a woman who cleans toilets for $14 an hour so she can keep her mother alive. Talina's lips parted. No sound came out. You want to know who Serenity is to me? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She's the most honest person in this house. She's been working double shifts, her duties and yours, Corvina, because you blackmailed her into silence. She's been sleeping on a floor, eating one meal a day, pouring every cent she earns into a hospital bill she can't afford. And not once, not one single time, has she asked anyone for help. He turned to Corvina. 19 years, Corvina. My mother trusted you. I trusted you. And you used that trust to crush a woman who had no power to fight back. Corvina's clipboard slipped from her hands. It clattered against the table. She didn't pick it up. The blackmail, Dashiell continued. Making her do your work, threatening to have her prosecuted for theft when all she did was give her dying mother a bed. You knew, and instead of helping, you used it as leverage. He set the necklace on the table. You're fired, Corvina. Effective immediately. You'll be escorted from the property within the hour. Corvina opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Dashiell, Mr. Kincaid, I've given this house 19, and this house has given you a salary, a title, and the power to make people's lives miserable. You chose the last one. He turned to Talina. And you. Talina had gone pale. The kind of pale that expensive foundation can't hide. Your access to this house is revoked. Your belongings will be shipped to whatever address you provide. If I find out you've contacted any member of my staff, any of them, I will have my legal team make sure you understand exactly how seriously I take the protection of the people who work for me. Talina grabbed her bag. Her hands were shaking. You're going to regret this, Dashiell. The board will hear about this. The press will hear that a billionaire fired his housekeeper for blackmail and banned his ex-fiancée for framing an innocent woman. I'm comfortable with that headline. Talina walked out. The click of her heels faded down the marble hallway. Corvina followed, escorted by Broderick, who for once had nothing clever to say. The room emptied slowly. Priscilla stood, looked at Serenity, and did something she'd never done in 11 months. She walked over and hugged her. Hard. The kind of hug that says, everything words can't. I knew, Priscilla whispered. I knew she was rotten. I should have said something sooner. You're saying it now, Serenity said. Priscilla nodded, wiped her eyes, and left. Then it was just the two of them. Serenity and Dashiell, standing in a conference room that smelled like furniture polish and burned coffee, with a velvet box on the table between them. I don't know what to say, Serenity said. You don't have to say anything. You just fired your head housekeeper of 19 years. I fired someone who used power to hurt people. There's a difference. She looked at the necklace. Your mother's. Yes? It's beautiful. He picked it up, held it out. She would have liked you, Serenity. She would have taken one look at you and said, that's the kind of woman who changes a house into a home. Serenity's eyes filled. She pressed her hand against her mouth to hold back the sob that was building in her chest. Your mother's surgery is Thursday, he said quietly. I've arranged a private room for her recovery, and when she's ready, she's welcome to stay in the cottage as long as she needs. Why? The word came out broken. Why are you doing all of this? He looked at her for a long time, and when he spoke, his voice was the softest it had ever been. Because my mother taught me that kindness isn't a weakness, and you taught me that she was right. Serenity stood in the empty conference room, tears running down her face, and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd forgotten its name. Safe. She felt safe. They tried to break her one last time. 3 days passed like a deep breath. The house changed. Not the walls, not the floors, not the chandeliers. Those stayed exactly where they'd always been. But the air changed. The silence that used to press down on the rooms like a weight lifted, and something lighter took its place. Something that might have been peace. Serenity still arrived at 4:47 a.m. She still wore the navy blue uniform. She still polished and scrubbed and arranged lilies in the foyer vases. But now, when she walked through the hallways, she didn't disappear. She moved like someone who had been given permission to exist. Dashiell hired a temporary housekeeper to cover Corvina's duties, a kind, grey-haired woman named Merritt, who smiled easily and said please and thank you like they were natural parts of speech. The staff adjusted quickly. Priscilla started humming in the kitchen again. Broderick stopped calling Serenity Cinderella. Even the part-time cleaners seemed to stand a little straighter. And on Thursday morning, Opaline went into surgery. Serenity sat in the private waiting room that Dashiell had arranged. Soft chairs, fresh flowers, a window overlooking the East River, and waited. She didn't pray out loud. She didn't need to. The prayer was in her breathing, in the way she sat, in the way her hands stayed folded in her lap, palms pressed together, steady. Dashiell came at noon. He didn't announce himself. He just walked in, set a cup of tea on the table beside her, chamomile, because he'd learned it was her mother's favorite and guessed it might be hers too, and sat down in the next chair. They didn't speak for a long time. The city hummed outside the window. Somewhere below, an ambulance siren rose and fell. Inside the room, it was just the two of them, sitting with the weight of a life hanging in the balance. "She's strong," Dashiell said finally. "She's the strongest person I've ever known." "Then she'll be fine." Serenity looked at him. "You sound sure." "I've learned to trust the people who refuse to quit. Your mother is one of them. So are you." 4 hours later, Dr. Adebayo walked in, pulled off his surgical cap, and smiled. "The surgery was a success. The new valve is functioning perfectly. She's in recovery now. She'll be groggy, but you can see her in about an hour." Serenity pressed both hands over her face and wept. Not the broken, desperate crying of the cottage floor. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes when the thing you were most afraid of doesn't happen. When the worst-case scenario steps aside and lets grace walk through instead. Dashiell put his hand on her shoulder. Just his hand. Nothing more. "But it was enough. Thank you," she whispered through her fingers. "You don't have to thank me. I will anyway. Every day. For the rest of my life." But some people don't know how to lose. Thelina Voss had been humiliated, marched out of the Kincaid mansion in front of the staff, stripped of her access, warned by lawyers. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life in rooms where she was the most important person present, the fall was unbearable. She didn't grieve it. She weaponized it. 2 days after Opaline's surgery, a story appeared on the website of a tabloid that specialized in the private lives of New York's elite. The headline was surgical in its cruelty. "Kincaid Air Falls for Live-In Maid. Sources say she moved her family into his mansion while he was away." The article was detailed. It named Serenity. It described the cottage. It painted a picture of a calculating young woman who had wormed her way into a billionaire's home, smuggled in her sick mother for free housing, and manipulated her employer's emotions to secure a financial windfall. The quotes were anonymous but specific. Too specific. "She knew exactly what she was doing," one source said. "She cried in front of him on purpose. It was all a performance." Another, He's a lonely man who lost his mother. She exploited that grief. The article was everywhere by noon. It hit social media like a lit match on gasoline. Comment sections filled with opinions from strangers who had never met Serenity, never cleaned a floor, never held a dying parent's hand in a borrowed room. Serenity found out when Priscilla called her, voice tight with fury. "Have you seen it?" "Seen what?" "Don't look at it, I'm serious, don't read it." But she did. Of course she did. She sat in the cottage beside her mother's empty bed. Opaline was still at the hospital recovering, and read every word on her cracked phone screen. When she finished, she set the phone down and stared at the wall. She didn't cry. She was past crying. This was something else, a numbness that comes when the world takes the best thing you have and twists it into something ugly. Dashiell read it in his office. He read it twice. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles went white. Then he picked up the phone and called his attorney. "Find out who the sources are, every one of them, and get me the editor of that publication on the line within the hour." Then he called Serenity. She answered on the fourth ring. Her voice was flat. "I saw it," she said before he could speak. "It's not true, you know that. I know that. But everyone else now thinks I'm a con artist who tricked a billionaire into paying my bills. I don't care what everyone else thinks. I do." Her voice cracked, just barely, just at the edges. "Because I'm not what they're saying. I've never been what they're saying, and I can't fight a headline. I don't have the money, the lawyers, the—" "You have me." Silence. A long one. "Dashiell, maybe I should leave. Maybe I should just go. Take my mother and disappear somewhere before this gets worse." "Is that what you want?" "No, but it might be what's right." "It's not, and I'm not going to let you run from a lie." That evening, something worse arrived. A manila envelope was delivered to the mansion by courier. Inside was a forged document, a police report dated 3 weeks prior, claiming that Serenity Lowe had been investigated for theft at a previous employer. The report was fake. The precinct number didn't exist. The badge number belonged to no officer, but it looked real enough to be dangerous. Attached was a handwritten note on cream stationery. "Submit this to the press, or I will. She's not who you think she is." A friend. Dashiell held the envelope and felt something cold settle in his chest. He recognized the stationery. He recognized the handwriting. Corvina. He sat in his office and understood for the first time the full scope of what they had done. Thelina had provided the media story. Corvina had manufactured the evidence. Together, they had built a machine designed to do one thing: destroy a woman whose only crime was being kind in a house full of cruelty. He locked the envelope in his desk drawer, called his lawyer again, and said 5 words. "I want them held accountable." At Mount Sinai, Serenity sat beside her mother's bed in the recovery room. Opaline was awake now, still weak, still connected to monitors, but awake. Her color was better. Her breathing was easier. The new valve was doing its job, pumping life through a body that had been running on borrowed time. "You're quiet, baby," Opaline said, "just thinking." "About the article?" Serenity looked at her. "You saw it?" "The nurse showed me. She thought she was being helpful." Opaline shook her head. "People love a story about a woman falling. They never ask if she was pushed. They're saying I used you, Mama. They're saying I moved you into the cottage to manipulate him." "And what do you say?" "I say I moved you in because you were going to die on the street." Opaline reached for her daughter's hand. Her grip was stronger than it had been in months, still fragile, but alive. "Let me tell you something, Serenity. I've been on this earth for 70 years. I've been poor. I've been sick. I've been lied about and looked down on by people who didn't know the first thing about my life. And the one thing I've learned is this." She squeezed Serenity's hand. "The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. Lies are fast. They spread like fire, but the truth is patient. It waits, and it always outlasts the lie. Serenity leaned forward and pressed her forehead against her mother's hand. What if they win, Mama? What if the lie is bigger than the truth this time? Opaline lifted her daughter's chin with one finger, looked into her eyes with the kind of certainty that only a mother who has survived everything can carry. Baby, you walked into a rich man's house with nothing but your hands and your heart. You cleaned his floors. You loved his home. You brought your dying mother into a cottage because you had no one else to turn to. And when they came for you, when they called you a thief, when they tried to break you, you stood up and said, I didn't do this. You didn't run. You didn't lie. You looked them in the eye. She wiped a tear from Serenity's cheek. You've already won, sweetheart. They just don't know it yet. The maid who was loved by a king. The truth moved slowly, but it moved. Dashiell's legal team worked through the weekend. By Monday, they had traced the tabloid sources to 2 phone numbers. One registered to Thelina Voss, the other to a prepaid cell purchased near Corvina Hatch's apartment. The forged police report was confirmed as fabricated. Wrong precinct format, wrong badge numbers, ink from a home printer. The tabloid retracted the article within 4 hours. Not quietly, loudly. A full retraction on the front page, along with an apology naming Serenity and acknowledging the story, was based on fabricated sources. Thelina's lawyer filed a counterclaim that lasted 3 days before being withdrawn. Her attorney used the phrase, "My client wishes to resolve this matter privately." Translation: she was scared. Corvina didn't respond at all. Her apartment went dark. Her phone went to voicemail. She disappeared the way people do when the walls they built collapse inward. Serenity didn't follow any of it. She didn't read the retraction. She didn't check the comments. She didn't track the legal filings or the letters or the countersuits. Dashiell handled all of it, and he handled it the way he handled everything, quietly, completely, and without asking for credit. She spent the week where she wanted to be, at her mother's side. Opaline was recovering faster than anyone expected. The new valve was strong. Her color was coming back, not just the color of health, but the color of herself. She started talking more. She started laughing. She asked Priscilla to sneak her a slice of sweet potato pie, and Priscilla showed up with the entire thing, wrapped in aluminum foil, hidden inside a tote bag like contraband. That woman is a saint, Opaline said, licking her fork. She's a cook who likes breaking rules, Serenity said. Same thing. On Saturday afternoon, Dashiell visited the hospital. He brought flowers, not from a florist, but from the garden, white roses cut at an angle, stems wrapped in a damp paper towel. Opaline looked at them, then looked at him. You cut those yourself. Serenity taught me how. Opaline smiled, the kind of smile that carries 50 years of wisdom in it. Sit down, young man. He sat. My daughter tells me you're the reason I'm alive. Your daughter is the reason you're alive. I just wrote a check. Opaline studied him the way she studied fabric before cutting it, measuring, testing, looking for the grain. Why did you do it? And don't give me a humble answer. I'm 70 years old and I just survived heart surgery. I deserve the truth. Dashiell was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke like a man who had been carrying something heavy and was finally ready to set it down. When my mother was dying, I wasn't there. I was in Tokyo, closing a deal that I can't even remember now. She called me on a Tuesday, said she was tired, said she loved me, said she'd see me when I got home. She died on Wednesday. I landed on Thursday. He paused. I've spent 3 years trying to outrun that. Building things, buying things, filling rooms with stuff that doesn't matter. And then I came home and heard your daughter crying through a cottage door, holding your hands. begging God for more time. And I thought, she's doing the thing I didn't do. She's choosing to be here. She's choosing love over everything else. He looked at Opaline. I wrote the check because I couldn't let her lose what I lost, not when I had the power to stop it. Opaline's eyes filled. She reached out and took his hand, the way a mother does, not a stranger. You didn't fail your mama, Dashiell. You hear me? She called you on Tuesday because she knew. Mothers always know. She said goodbye the way she wanted to, with your voice in her ear and love in her heart. Don't carry that guilt anymore. It's not yours to hold. Something broke open in his chest. Not the sharp kind of breaking, the kind that lets light in. He pressed his hand over hers and nodded, and for a moment in that hospital room, the billionaire and the seamstress's mother held onto each other like two people who understood the same language of loss. 2 weeks later, Opaline came home, not to the cottage, to the main house. Dashiell had the East Wing guest suite prepared, the one with the tall windows and the view of the garden. Fresh sheets, white lilies in a glass vase, the lavender blanket folded at the foot of the bed. He'd had a ramp installed at the side entrance so she wouldn't have to manage the stairs. Serenity walked her mother through the front door. Opaline stopped in the foyer. She looked up at the chandelier, at the marble, at the cream-colored walls with their gold moldings. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "Welcome home, Mama." "Baby, this is not my home." "It is now." Priscilla met them in the kitchen with soup, bread, and a hug that lifted Opaline 2 inches off the ground. "You're going to eat 3 meals a day in this house," Priscilla said. "Doctor's orders." "Whose doctor?" "Mine. I'm the kitchen doctor, and my prescription is butter." Opaline laughed. A real laugh, the kind that fills a room and makes everyone in it feel warmer. That evening, after Opaline was settled and resting, Dashiell found Serenity in the garden. She was sitting on the stone bench near the roses, looking at the sky. The sun was setting behind the townhouses across the street, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. She'd taken off her apron. Her hair was down, loose curls falling past her shoulders, catching the last light. He sat beside her. "How is she?" "Asleep. Happy. She ate 2 bowls of Priscilla's soup and asked for a third." "That's a good sign. That's a miracle." They sat in the quiet for a while. The garden smelled like roses and fresh-cut grass, and the end of a long, hard chapter. Serenity. "Yes?" "I need to say something, and I need you to hear it without the uniform, without the house, without any of the things that make this complicated." She turned to look at him. His face was open in a way she'd never seen. No armor, no title, no walls. "I didn't fall in love with you because of what happened, not because of the cottage or the hospital or the way you held your mother's hands. I fell in love with you because of the way you told me to prime the steam wand, because you smiled like you'd forgotten how, and then remembered, because you cut roses at an angle and talk to the lilies when you think no one's listening." She laughed, a single, surprised, wet laugh. "You heard that?" "I hear everything in this house. It's very quiet." She wiped her eyes. "Dashiell, I'm a maid. Your Serenity low. Everything else is just a job. The world won't see it that way. The world doesn't live in this house." He took her hand. Not urgently, not dramatically. The way you pick up something precious that you intend to hold for a very long time. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. I'm asking you to let me stand next to you. That's all." She looked at his hand around hers. She thought about the cottage floor, the cardboard in her shoe, the $43 that had to last until Friday. She thought about Corvina's voice. "That is all you are. That is all you will ever be." She thought about Talina. Don't confuse attention with intention. And then she thought about her mother's dream. The tall man in the doorway, the one who saw her. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay." He smiled. Not the magazine smile, the real one. The lopsided one that made him look like a man instead of a billionaire. And in the garden of a mansion on East 78th Street, as the sun sank behind the skyline and the roses glowed like small fires in the fading light, Serenity Lowe let someone hold her hand and didn't let go. 6 months later, on a Sunday morning in December, Opaline Lowe sat in the conservatory of the Kincaid mansion in a cream-coloured armchair, wrapped in her lavender blanket, watching her daughter walk down an aisle made of white rose petals scattered across marble floors. Serenity wore white. Simple, beautiful. Her curls fell loose around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of white lilies, the same kind she'd arranged in the foyer 100 times before. Dashiell stood at the end of the aisle in a dark navy suit, eyes bright, hands steady, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Because to him, she was. Priscilla cried the entire ceremony. Broderick handed out tissues and, for the first and only time in his life, said nothing clever. Merritt arranged the flowers. Dr. Adebayo came as a guest and sat in the second row, smiling like a man who understood that some healings happen in operating rooms and some happen in gardens. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, Opaline raised her hand. The room froze. "I just want to say one thing," she said, voice steady and clear and carrying every ounce of 70 years of living. "My daughter walked into this house with nothing but her hands and her heart. And she leaves this room today with everything she ever deserved." She looked at Dashiell. "You take care of my sunrise, young man." "Yes, ma'am. Every single day." Opaline nodded, satisfied, and settled back into her chair. The room exhaled. Priscilla sobbed louder, and when Dashiell kissed Serenity gently, softly, like a promise sealed, every person in that room understood something that the tabloids and the comment sections and the cruel voices of the world would never grasp. That kindness is not weakness. That love doesn't ask for a resume. That the people who clean the floors and hold the hands and show up at 4:47 a.m. with cardboard in their shoes, they are the ones holding the world together. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world holds them back. The end.